Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to tonight's program, An Evening with Stanford Football Coach Tavita Pritchard. My name is Alex Howe. I'm class of 2022, board member of the Stanford Asian Pacific American Alumni Club, or SAPAAC for short, and former chair of the Stanford Athletics Committee. Established in 1989, SAPAAC has historically been one of Stanford University's largest ethnic affinity groups and one of the largest alumni organizations with nearly 3,000 members. We are dedicated to connecting Asian American and Pacific Islander alumni to the university and to each other. Membership empowers you to attend numerous events in your region, engage with a thriving alumni community, and receive the latest communications about our alma mater from an AAPI perspective. If you are a Stanford alumni who is tuning in and are not already a SAPAAC member, we encourage you to join the club and sign up for our monthly newsletter. To learn more about SAPAAC, please visit our website, sapaac.org. Tonight's program will feature a virtual fireside chat with Stanford Football's new head coach, Tavita Pritchard. We will be covering some questions about his time at Stanford in an icebreaker format, his Samoan heritage, and Stanford football in the upcoming season. Because of time constraints, we will try to get to audience Q&A. Please ask any questions using the Q&A button on Zoom, and please note that some questions will be incorporated as part of the main chat. Finally, this event is closed to the media. Without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our featured guest, Stanford's 37th Bradford M. Freeman Director of Football, Tavita Pritchard. A Stanford graduate and former Cardinal quarterback, Coach Pritchard is best known for leading Stanford to a historic 24-23 upset over 41-point favorites, number 2 USC in 2007, throwing the game-winning touchdown. After graduating in 2009, he joined the Stanford coaching staff and eventually served as offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach from 2018 to 2022 under Coach David Shaw. He then spent 3 seasons in the NFL as quarterbacks coach for the Washington Commanders, coaching Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota. And in 2026, he was named the program's 37th Bradford M. Freeman Director of Football. Please join me in welcoming Coach Tavita Pritchard. Coach, welcome. Thank you very much for spending your time with us tonight.
No, thank you, Alex. I appreciate that introduction, man. I might start bringing you places with me.
I would love to do that. Coach, we'll start with a few icebreaker questions. It's going to be 30-second responses about your time at Stanford.
Great.
We're going to keep this light. First, what was your freshman dorm?
Okay, my freshman dorm was in Wilbur Hall, and I was in Rinconada.
Rinconada. Okay, favorite spot on campus?
Oh my gosh. Well, because I've had so many years at Stanford, I can't just stop at one. I mean, especially because like I have like Stanford as a student, and then I have Stanford as like a single coach, and then a married dad coach, and so there's all these different chapters in my Stanford experience. You know what? I think as a student, I'd probably have to say. I would probably have to say the Oval. I know that's a really like cliche answer, but I think like the longer I've been here and now spending 3 years away, like when I come back to campus, you walk through what we consider the front door, the Oval and Memchu, the view of that. Like it's just like every time I come back, I just remember like being a student here. It was always the best when you'd be in spring quarter and inevitably like one of the professors would be like, "Hey, let's just go do class outside." In the oval. So I'd come back to that. I'm fully aware of the how cliche that is, but as a dad and like going beyond that, I really love Meyer Green now. Like I was still going to school when it was actually Meyer Library. Like I remember that being a place where we would actually like go, and I had a power class there, the rhetoric of documentary films. But now, like with our kids, like we go there, they ride bikes, in that little spiral sidewalk. We get food there at Coupa Cafe, so I'd have to say that's one of my favorite places. And then of course, like I'm obligated slash, of course, my soul is going to say Stanford Stadium. My wife and I had our Friday night wedding event there, up under the arches, and that's I've had so many wonderful memories in that stadium. I'm really excited to be back there on August 29th in about 172 days, but who's counting? back in there for my first time in a while, and I'm really excited to do that.
That's awesome. Last icebreaker question, and this may be a tough one. Favorite Stanford memory while you were a student?
Oh my gosh. Okay, since you brought up the USC game, I'm actually going to pick a different game from that year that I feel it honestly probably was a little bit more memorable, Alex, because we beat Cal for the Axe at home in 2007. And I actually ended up splitting time in that game with TCO Strander, and so we both got to play through a touchdown in that game. We that team had some players on it too. I mean, that was Deshaun Jackson and a bunch of those guys. Desmond Bishop, I think was his name. The nose guard was anyway. They had a bunch of really good players, and at one point in that season, I think they had been ranked in the top five. And of course, like we were a scrappy team, and that's one thing probably we'll get into. But like I just remember what changed more than anything in that time when we moved from kind of that 2006 season where we weren't very good, to again kind of a scrappy 2007 season where we beat USC, we won the Axe back. We were competitive and we fought people tooth and nail, and I just remember that season so well, and I remember that game in particular because like even though that Cal team was talented and they had retained the Axe, I want to say for like 7 years at that point. We were going to win that thing, and it was a ton of fun because the students were on the field afterwards, and it was the win at home, I think, that really sets that one apart for me.
That's awesome. Winning the Axe is always an amazing thing, a big thing. I was a student toward the end of the 9 year win streak, and actually this latest big game where we won the Axe back was probably one of my favorite memories at Stanford because I didn't really appreciate how much having the X
Having
meant to us until we won it back after
Sure.
a long stretch. So I'm glad you mentioned a big game, especially as a former chair of the Stanford Axe Committee.
There you go.
Um,
Are you the one
uh,
that did you actually have it strapped to your wrist, Alex?
yes, we're the ones who strap it to we strap it to our belt and we're running around with it. Yeah, and
So
so
you
yeah.
personally had it strapped to you though.
Um, I was chair during COVID, so not exactly,
Oh
but
God.
I have been strapped. I have obviously
Okay. You had to
held up
socially
the axe
distance
before.
from the axe. I got it.
Yes, exactly,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, Coach, we wanted to ask questions about your upbringing.
Yeah,
Your paternal grandfather was born and raised in Samoa.
that's right.
You've spoken extensively about doing things fa'a Samoa or the Samoan way. What cultural values from your Samoan upbringing show up most in how you coach? And how
Mm,
has your Samoan heritage shaped the way you approach football and leadership?
mm. Yeah, I love this. I mean, I think like many of us, or if not all of us, we're all shaped by our upbringing, shaped by our experiences, and especially specific to the cultures that we grew up in. Yeah, I owe so much to all of my grandparents, and when I think specifically about my dad's mom and dad, Kayla and Taulongo Pritchard are their names. They grew up in the village of Leone, American Samoa. Um, and like many immigrant stories, they set out for a better life and life for their children. And my grandfather joined the army. And he actually was first stationed in Virginia, coincidentally, where I just came from, and that was his first duty station. You can imagine my grandmother from all the way from American Samoa, landing in the Jim Crow South in the 50s. She didn't know what was going on, and that was something I remember hearing stories about that. They were there for a short time before they moved to Tacoma, Washington, or Lakewood, Washington, where Fort Lewis is, the Army base there. And that's kind of where my grandparents set up. And that's where my dad grew up. That's where I grew up. And the things that I know to be true about our Fasamoa and the ways that it informs who I am today, and therefore how I coach. And Alex, I'll share just a little bit with you. One of the best pieces of advice that I got early on in coaching, um, was a simple message of be yourself. And you come across so many great coaches, both as a player and then working for and working with other coaches, that it's really easy to see coaches and just try to emulate them, right? And that, not that that's a bad thing, right? We can all take stuff from other people that we admire or that have success and that we want to replicate. But it was more a message of authenticity and being genuine. And so when I think about what I bring to our team and our program as a coach, it really isn't separate from who I am as a person. So when I think about leadership, when I think about what our Fa Samoa has just blessed me with in growing up in the family that I grew up in and the culture that I grew up in, I think the first thing I would say is just kind of the communal aspect of our culture, right? I mean, obviously we're an island people. We come from a very small landmass in a really really big ocean, and so I think it's obvious the reasons that we had to learn how to work together, right? Because when you put people on a small island, right, we all have our jobs. We all learn how to work together in harmony. Not that everything's going to be perfect all the time, but that's part of the beauty of team and community is as people own their different parts and they collaborate and they work together. That's something that's just always made sense to me. I also grew up in a really big family. I grew up with 10 siblings. And so again, I think being able to operate where it's kind of the group above yourself is something that I've just always known has been very central to my experience as a person. And so it's something that still makes sense to me to this day. When it comes to leadership, there's a saying in our Fasamoa that is "Ole ala, ile pule, ole tautua," and that means the road to leadership is paved through service. And it's something so my grandfather was a pastor. My dad is a pastor and was a high school football coach. And so when I saw them in positions of leadership, and especially in football with my father, it was always through the lens of them serving people. I can still remember people coming up to my dad after seasons or years later after they played for him and just thanking him for the impact that he had on their lives. And so from an early age, and this is Alex, all the while never knowing that I wanted to coach. That's not something in my playing career that I was like, yeah, I definitely want to be a coach. But now I've grown an appreciation for the impact that my dad had on people, that my grandpa had on people because of their approach to those leadership positions, right? It was way more about serving people than it was about themselves. And that's the approach that I try to take, is it's really not about me. It's really, as I think about being back at Stanford, it's really like, how do we make this experience for our student athletes the best it can possibly be, right? How do we help them self-actualize and be the best versions of themselves every day? And it starts by putting a great support system around them. Andrew and I have really been working hard to get an amazing group of people around them, and we're a lot closer to that. We're not fully finished with it, but like with the coaches, I'm just really excited about the support staff we've put around them and are continuing to. But yeah, going back to like the leadership and what our culture has taught me, so much of it is, yeah, putting other people first, and especially in positions of leadership.
That's great, and that's such a beautiful answer. I think that you know these days it is so important to put people before yourself, and that's such a powerful message to tell the world and to continue to tell the world through everything that you do. So that's amazing, and actually, it serves as a perfect segue because one of my football related questions, because I'm going to shift the focus a little bit to football. You
Yeah.
mentioned your coaching staff. You've just filled out your coaching staff, all of whom have impressive resumes at the NFL and or college levels. You spoke about it in your introductory press conference and interviews regarding looking for connectors, teachers, and
Yeah.
communicators. What was that process like, and what was your thought process behind your staff strategy?
Yeah. That's great, Alex. I think what that process was like was that it was long. excuse me, it was intensive, but it was also enriching in a lot of ways. You know, one, because I love this place, Stanford, so much. And again, everything is in service of our student athletes and trying to make sure that they have the best opportunity possible and the best experience possible. And I know that the people we put around them is going to play such a huge role in that. And so as I went through this process, you know, I got to connect with a lot of coaches, a lot of football people, and hear different philosophies and schemes and ways of teaching and ways of thinking. And you know, I was exposed to a lot of incredible people in football, and you know, realized more and more that one, there's a lot of really good coaches out there, and two, there's a strong desire and appetite to be at Stanford and come be a part of what we're building here. And that was exciting because again, like we work with a really special category of student athlete, and the guys that are in that locker room, people in the NFL, people in college, they want to work with them. And so it was I would say it was gratifying in a lot of ways. It was long. It was hard work. But I'm really glad for having gone through the process because I think we ended up with some incredible people.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, talking to people in inner football circles, there, what struck me was how thoughtful you guys were throughout your process,
Mm,
and the obviously you hired some really young guys, some up and comers. I'm thinking of like your new O line coach, Coach Kukwewa, and but how highly people spoke of the person of each of
mm,
your coaches is was really striking to me. You look, I also just to go off on a little tangent. You thank you for taking this job. I mean, it's been no secret that prior to last season, the program had experienced a downturn. And people have been and some still are quite down on the program, but I personally am incredibly excited that you're at least part of the solution here.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
Thank you. Um, what should Stanford football fans expect to see from a Tavita Pritchard offense in 2026? And beyond that, that is similar or different to this to Stanford's offense when you were our offensive coordinator.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think what's really kind of been part of my journey, and this ties nicely into Alex what we talked about in you know my life and experience as a Samoan American. You know, because we are the sum of our experiences, and so when you look at offenses, you know, I've been exposed to obviously what I was here at Stanford for a long time. And then, you know, I worked for a year with Eric Bieniemy in basically the Kansas City system. I worked for the last 2 years with Cliff Kingsbury and kind of his version of, you know, what he grew up in and the air raid kind of spread at the line of scrimmage system, working with Jaden Daniels. I'd like to think I'm a collection of all those things, especially because there are a lot of different ways to skin a cat, you know, and there are a lot of different ways to attack a defense. What it really comes down to is less the lines on the paper and more how you play, how you get down, right, and the energy you play with, and moreover, you know, even thinking back to some of those great teams we had in the 2010s with some of these guys, right, like Zach Ertz and Christian McCaffrey. Shoot, even my old teammate Richard Sherman right here, right, who played receiver for a little bit. Um, those teams were all more about the culture of our team than they were like the actual schemes we ran. So, Alex, my best answer to your question is like what you're going to see is you're going to see a really high energy, physical, tough brand of football. Um, the way that that's going to play out from a personnel standpoint, from a run pass split, like that's going to be determined by who we have. We are very much a players over plays outfit. And, you know, who are going to be those emerging guys? Who are going to be those Zach Ertzes and those Christian McCaffreys that rise to the surface? And there's already like guys, as I look at our roster, that we're really excited to get into spring ball and to teach our offense and to see what we can do. But again, like what I come back to when I think of like those great teams in the 2010s, like it's way more about the style of play that those teams were characterized by. And so what I know is like is that's where our focus is going to be on how we play. And that starts, Alex, with how we practice. And that's why that's where my immediate focus, and we've been talking a lot in our team meetings about what's important now. How do we be where our feet are? And like what's important right now is for us to learn how to practice and compete in practice. Because like that's what's gonna make a big difference on Saturdays in the fall and on August 29th is how we practice right now and how we start training and building habits in that way. Because that's what makes those great offenses, right? And those tough, powerful teams is how you practice and how you train those things.
That's exciting to me. That's for me that especially that last part of the answer is a continuation of what Coach Frank Reich had really instilled in the program in 2024, and it was part of the reason why for some pundits we overachieved last year was that we were we some of the things that we did in practice the football team did in practice translated into games because uh, there was a huge emphasis on practicing the way you play. So that's
Hmm.
that's really exciting. And again, Todd, you mentioned all the Stanford greats that I'm familiar with: Christian McCaffrey, Richard Sherman, and but you speaking about the style of football being most important is really fascinating. So my question to you is when your offense is working exactly the way you want, what conflict are you creating for the defense every snap?
Yeah, so there's different ways to put the defense on its heels. And this is and I think about it in different ways. One, again, I'll go back to the first thing is players, right? It's players over plays. So the first thing that we do on offense, and I know great defenses I've been around is they look at the opposing team's tape and they go, who do we got to stop? Right? Who are the players over there? And so that's the first place that we know that we have to apply pressure to a defense is how do we get the ball in the hands of our best players? Or how do we lean on our best players in our version of the offense? So when we're clicking on offense, we are distributing the ball in a way that's highlighting our players' strengths, right? If that's the guys up front, then that's running behind them. If that's the quarterback dealing to a lot of people, that's putting the ball in his hands, right? Maybe in a drop back sense, maybe in play action, maybe in an RPO game, but it's highlighting the players first and foremost. The next thing is, and this speaks to kind of my West Coast offense background. It's uh, doing a lot doing what looks like a lot to the defense with simple things for the offense, right? So doing a little but making it look like a lot for the defense, right? You do so with personnel, you do so with motion, you do so with different formations, and so we're going to be limited to a certain degree in kind of what we roll out, but it's going to look like a lot. So using all those different things I just shift, motion, personnel, formation, like that's going to be the way that we can use, especially our guys, the way that they work not just their raw fit or sorry intellectual capacity, but even just the way that they work. I mean, the way that Stanford guys study and apply themselves, like it's second to none. And the way that we can use complex schemes, they can learn it, and that's why you're able to run pro schemes here. Right, is because our guys are dialed in. They're passionate about it in that way. So that's the other thing is like we will give the illusion of complexity while staying simple so that our guys can play fast. The other thing that I've really grown an appreciation for, Alex, is the use of tempo, right? And I'll take you back to even my time as a quality control coach here, working on the defensive side of the ball under Derek Mason and Jason Tarver, coaching in Vic Fangio's defense. We played Chip Kelly's Oregon offense, right? And the way that they utilize tempo. Well, I'll tell you right now, one of the hardest things to play in Chip Kelly's one of his best versions of that offense was not just the fact that they would go fast all the time, right? It's the fact that they would go fast and then slow down and then go fast and then slow down, right? That is the best use of tempo in my opinion. And so in building this system, that's another way that we know that we want to have the ability to apply pressure to defenses. So without giving too much away, right? Like tempo is another really good way to apply pressure. So when I think about what will the ideal version of our offense look like, it's those different ways of applying pressure. And then the last one I'd come back to, and this is more going to be shed a little bit of light on what I've come to know about Stanford specifically, and going back to style of play is like we're going to be able to run the football. And that's something that I know needs to be present in an effective offense is you have to have an ability to run. Now, some people say be balanced. When I think about balance, it is having the threat to run the football. Because there are times where if a team knows you can run it, they're going to load the box and make it really hard to run it. Well, we've just put them back on their heels, as I referenced, right? Because now they're committing a whole bunch of people to stop in the run. We're not going to be bullheaded about it. If they are going to make us throw it, we're going to find ways to do that, right? When they sell out to stop the run. But that starts with an ability to run the football.
That's great. You mentioned a few things there. I mean, obvious. A lot of football analysts will talk about eye candy for that the defense is showing, right? And but you talk about eye candy in the sense of the offense, which is really exciting. And I'd love an offense that is just going to confuse the heck out of a defense. Talking about tempo, obviously tempo is really, really important. I mean, some of the best football teams I've watched utilize that fast, slow tempo.
Mhm.
And then obviously, obviously running the ball. I mean, we ran the ball quite a bit last year, but you talking about using running the ball as a threat, not necessarily being wedded to running the ball, is also really, really exciting because it shows an adaptability to the offense that maybe Stanford hasn't really seen in a while. So because it's been fairly one dimensional for quite a bit. Um, I want to ask one more question, and then we'll get to an audience question. Um, what are your goals for the team this season? What would constitute a successful season, and what should fan and student expectations be?
Yeah, that is a great question. So we've been, this is we just finished up kind of our winter two chunk, and that's conditioning on the field. And we were able to go out and do some of that with those guys. And we've been talking about being competitive as one of our values, and that's something that we know that we have to live and eat and breathe every single day is like a competitive spirit. Uh, in that, right, when you talk about like we want to live according to our values, and we want to play like when you turn on our film, uh, going back to play style, I want our play style to jump off the film. And what I mean by that is like I want to see a connected group. I want to see a competitive group that's high, high, high energy. And um, I just know, Alex, that like if you turn on the film and you see that play style and that we live that out every day, like that's going to be a manifestation of how we operate in practice and in the meeting rooms and in the locker room. And so honestly, my goals are um, much more qualitative than they are quantitative, right? And that's why I'm referencing like I want our team to be an extremely connected team that communicates really well. I want to be a team that's competitive as heck. When you go back to again like my time here in that 2007 season, and when we started to kind of stop the negative momentum and started going the other direction, that started with how we competed, and we didn't set goals about like how many games we're going to win and what we're going to do in that regard. We set goals on how we're going to compete every day. So again, like when I think about the goals that we have for this team, it is how we operate day in and day out, how we come into this building with a mindset that we're going to get better every single day. Because I know, again, if I think about okay, what I want it to look like in the fall, what are those goals? It's much more about how that film looks when you turn it on and the style of football that we play. That's going to be representative of who we are and what our program is about and the way that it's going. Because I also know, Alex, that if we're playing the way that I want it to look, we're going to win games in the process, and that's just going to be a byproduct, right? That's just going to be something that happens as a byproduct of the way that we play and the way that we live and the way that we practice.
That's great. That's beautiful, and that's a great way to end my questions. We've had a few questions from the audience that are really fascinating. But I really want to ask this question.
Okay.
And maybe this question is probably better answered by General Manager Andrew Luck, because
Okay.
he's more involved in kind of the house settlement and the NIL stuff. But I'll ask you anyways. We there's been, I think, reports of like 20.5 million of house settlement money that's going to be allocated to the football team. And my and obviously one part of the question is how much additional money can be raised by outside donors to fund a football team, and I would say my answer personally is as much as we can. But the second part is a little more pertinent to you. How are you able to compete with schools with much larger NIL budgets?
Hmm. Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will to some degree. I'll defer that the first part of that one because it's a little more technical. And I'll just share this. Like a huge part of the reason in me coming back was pairing up and partnering with my old teammate Andrew, right? Who we have a ton of trust and connection built up over a number of years to where, there's stuff that he majors in that I don't, right? And I get to really focus on football. But the second part of the question is pertinent because it's the other part of the reason, a big part of the reason I'm back is Stanford is still Stanford. And the uniqueness of this place and our value proposition is different than any other school in the country. And the way that we're going to compete with schools that have a bigger NIL budget is the way that we competed the same way in those years where, the blue bloods of college football had better facilities than us and more uniform combinations than us and this, that, and the other because we are still unique. We don't subscribe to those things. Now, I do know I understand that's not apples to apples, right? Now you're talking monetary dollars. We will be competitive in that space. And what I'm saying is while we won't be the top necessarily of those things, like as long as we get close enough and we're competitive enough, the power of the Stanford brand still exists. The ability to come here and have the full Stanford experience and be a student and go to class with world-class other students and faculty, and then come here and be in a locker room full of guys who are committed and work really, really hard and are focused, like that is still unique to college football. And it's a place where guys can wrap their head around coming and being here and developing and staying. And again, I like there's a lot of people that will call me crazy, but like if there's one thing I've come to know about Stanford is that we are audacious and we believe that we can do things that other people say we can't do. So they can keep saying what they want, but I know that we're still a unique proposition, and our brand, especially the brand that I think about, is like when we bring recruits on campus, I introduce them to our guys and our players, and I say, hey man, go hang out with them for a couple hours and tell me that you're not like them and you don't want to be in a locker room full of those guys going on and being in the weight room and being on the practice field and going to class. Like that is our real sell. And again, we just have to be competitive in that space, which we will be. We don't have to be the top of that.
That's awesome. That excites me. I mean, a lot of the well, first, obviously, the general manager model of college football has never been done before, and a lot of people said, "Oh, you can't do that," and we've done it, and the results will be on the field, but so far it's been fairly successful, and there have been lots of you can't do that I've seen over this off season that just talking to you guys, it just in talking to people around the program, it seems like that's not those questions, those you can't do that is going to be turned into you can do that. So I'm really excited. One last question, and then I know you have to go because it's really important for you to get back to your wife and kids. The Are there are there challenges that you've seen players of Pacific Islander descent grapple with playing at an elite level? And how have how have you and as a Pacific Islander, and then also players you've mentored responded to these challenges in a positive way, and in maybe in a positive way? Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, as we all know, uh, uh, race, ethnicity are they're interesting in that like it's not a monolith. We're not all the same, but at the same point in time, the question is valid, especially because like things that exist in our communities have consistencies, right? Because of the way that our cultures function and things like that. And I'll share this. Uh, the some of the things that are the same reasons for the strength of our communities can have impacts that can uh, be difficult for and maybe it's not players who are playing at a certain level, but I'll give you an example. Like in the communities that I grew up in, right? Like family and church are the two most important things, and then like school is a I won't say a distant third, but it is clearly a third behind those two things, right? And again, that's not at face value, that's not bad. But when you start, especially for us at Stanford, when we start talking about AP classes and GPAs and SAT scores, right? Like doing the bare minimum is not enough, right? And so challenging, oftentimes, whether it's a Pacific Islander, in this space, like it is trying to get full buy-in, from the family and the community on all things related to, being a recruited student athlete. They have been challenges at different times, and so I think getting to see kind of the full picture, I think is one thing that has been a challenge at different times. But again, those are all rooted in the same reasons that make our cultures beautiful, right? And so I think there's a little bit of tension there, and I don't think full one way either side is correct. It's more just grappling with those tensions and making sure that we're having those conversations. And I'm up for those, and I love having those conversations with families and student athletes, recruits, because I think those are the things that's what life's all about.
That's amazing, and I would encourage the audience to keep having those conversations because those conversations are really really important and are really productive for our society.
Right.
Look, this concludes our event today. I'd like to thank you, Coach Pritchard, for your time and taking on this new challenge as Stanford football head coach. I'd also like to thank Brian Brownfield of Stanford Athletics for making this event happen.
No
Please
problem.
check out the links in the chat for more information about SAPAAC, how to buy Stanford football tickets, and season ticket renewals. And as always, go Stanford and beat Cal.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.